How many Amazon animals can you name right now? Go ahead. Think about it for a moment. The jaguar, the anaconda, the piranha, the pink river dolphin, maybe the harpy eagle. If you've watched enough nature documentaries, you might get to 10 species, 15 if you're curious, 20 if wildlife is a genuine passion. Now take a breath, because what I'm about to tell you changes everything. The Amazon basin is home to more than 3 million species, and scientists estimate that between 70 and 80% of them have never been named, never been filmed, never appeared in a single book, a single documentary, a single corner of the internet. They exist, they hunt, they feed, they reproduce, and they vanish from this world without a single human being ever knowing they were there. This is not a documentary about the famous animals of the Amazon. This is a documentary about the ones nobody knows, the ones hiding in the leaf litter, in the caves, in the black water, in the invisible ceiling of the canopy, the ones that have killed more people than jaguars and anacondas combined, and yet never appear on screen because they are small or ugly or simply unknown. And alongside them, I'm going to show you something even more unsettling: the human mysteries the forest has swallowed whole. Entire cities, entire peoples, entire civilizations, now resting quietly beneath the roots. Welcome to the forbidden Amazon, the one nobody wanted you to see. Before we go any further, if this is the kind of content you're here for, hit that like button right now and subscribe to Wild Dominion. We'd also love to know where in the world you're watching from. Drop your city and country in the comments below. We read every single one. Now let's go in. To understand why the Amazon hides so much, you first need to understand its scale. And the scale here breaks every reference point your mind can hold. The Amazon basin covers roughly 7 million square kilometers. That's more than twice the size of India. It's larger than all of Western Europe. If it were a country, it would be the 7th biggest on Earth. And inside that vast space, there is one dominant biome, the largest tropical rainforest that has ever existed on this planet. But it's not one forest. It never was. There are many Amazons layered on top of each other. There is the terra firma, the upland forest that never floods, where the tallest trees grow. There is the vasia, the floodplain forest drowned each year in white water carrying Andean sediment, milky and fertile. There is the Igapo, inundated by black water, dark, acidic, the color of strong tea, where fish swim between the treetops for months at a time. There are the white sand campinas, a kind of forest growing on pure sand, with dwarf trees and species found nowhere else on Earth. There are the Andean headwaters, where the river is born cold and clean. And there are the igarapes, those narrow serpentine streams threading beneath the canopy, which are probably the single most concentrated reservoirs of unknown life on the entire planet. The main river itself begins in Peru, at a glacial source more than 5,000 meters above sea level, and crosses an entire continent before emptying into the Atlantic, releasing so much fresh water that the ocean remains unsalted for more than 200 kilometers out to sea. 1/5 of all the fresh water that reaches the world's oceans moves through this single river. 1/5, just this one river. And beneath that river, beneath those trees, beneath those leaves, lives the true subject of this documentary. The invisible life, the life nobody catalogues, the life no film crew chases because it isn't photogenic, the life that kills more people quietly each year than all the great predators of the continent put together. Let's start with the most lethal animal in the forest, and prepare yourself, because it is not what you expect. It has no fangs, it has no claws, it doesn't roar or hiss. It measures barely 7 centimeters, and every year it poisons hundreds of people, many of whom bleed to death from the inside before reaching a hospital. Its name is Lonomia obliqua. People call it the assassin caterpillar, though what it actually is the larval stage of an entirely unremarkable nocturnal moth. But before that transformation, this creature moves through the Amazon in dense clusters along tree trunks, covered in green spines with earthy brown tones that blend seamlessly into the bark. And that is its trap. A hand pressed against a trunk, a bare arm brushing the surface, a child playing beneath a tree who accidentally makes contact with one of these clusters. The spines snap, and they inject into the skin one of the strangest and most devastating venoms known to science. The venom of the Lonomia doesn't paralyze. It doesn't produce sharp, immediate pain. It doesn't swell the bite site the way other stings do. What it does is something far more insidious. It dismantles the human body's clotting system. Imagine that your blood, the substance that normally seals a cut and forms a scab, suddenly forgets how. The tiny internal injuries that every body carries, microscopic, invisible, stop closing, and you begin to bleed from within. The victim bleeds from the gums, from the nose, from the ears, in the most severe cases, from the eyes. And if the antidote doesn't arrive in time, from inside the brain, the kidneys, the lungs. Death comes slowly, over hours or days, while the body hemorrhages inward, and no one can tell where the blood is going. Brazil alone records hundreds of accidents per year. The majority of victims are children and rural workers who never even saw what they touched. Here's what makes it most disturbing of all. The Lenomia is not aggressive, it doesn't attack, it doesn't follow anyone. It simply exists there, motionless, perfectly camouflaged, waiting to become a moth. It is accidental human contact that triggers the venom. The forest isn't to blame for humans reaching into it without knowing what they're touching. The antidote does exist, developed at the Instituto Butantan in Brazil, produced by extracting venom from the caterpillars themselves, injecting horses, and harvesting the antibodies. It is one of the quiet miracles of South American tropical medicine. But reaching that antidote in time from a remote riverside community is a race against the clock that is very often lost. And somewhere out there right now, on some Amazon tree trunk, dozens of Lenomia caterpillars are resting perfectly still, looking like nothing more than a green smear on the bark. Now raise your eyes to head height. Picture yourself entering a low-ceilinged Amazon cave. Caves in the Amazon are rare, but they exist, mostly in ancient sandstone country. You sweep your flashlight across the ceiling, and what you find there seems impossible. A segmented body, reddish-brown, 30 centimeters long, clinging to the rock on legs that grip the cracks of the ceiling. As you watch, one of those legs releases, and the creature, without falling, snatches a bat clean out of the air in mid-flight. It coils around it, injects venom, and begins to feed, still hanging from the ceiling, while the bat's wings are still beating. You have just found the Scolopendra gigantea, the giant centipede, the largest myriapod on Earth and one of the only arthropods anywhere on the planet capable of hunting flying vertebrates in the open air. This animal is real. It has been filmed by Venezuelan biologists in coastal mountain caves and in Amazonian caverns. This is not legend, not exaggeration. It is a centipede the length of your forearm that has evolved a hunting strategy so specific, so brutal, and so extraordinarily sophisticated that it uses cave ceilings as ambush platforms for bats in flight. Each of its legs can bear its body weight independently against the rock. With the remaining legs, it restrains the prey. Its fangs, called forcipules, deliver a potent venom, a cocktail of toxins that paralyzes the bat almost immediately. Then the digestion begins externally, enzymes dissolving the flesh from the outside in. For a human being, a bite from the giant centipede is rarely fatal, but it is agonizing. Hours of extreme pain, fever, swelling, tachycardia. There are rare recorded cases of death in small children, but the real significance of this creature isn't its danger to humans. It's what it tells us about this forest. Here, what is hidden doesn't have to kill you. It only has to prove that your place in the food chain isn't quite as high as you assumed. And as you absorb that lesson, let me tell you something that no European colonizer understood when they first arrived in these lands, something that archaeologists denied for centuries, historians ignored, and textbooks erased. The Amazon was never an untouched wilderness. For thousands of years, it was one of the most densely populated regions on the continent, and the remains of those civilizations are still there, beneath the roots, waiting to be uncovered. A few years ago, a team of archaeologists using LiDAR technology, a laser scanner fired from aircraft that can read the ground beneath the canopy without cutting a single tree, surveyed a remote region of the Ecuadorian Amazon in the Upano River Valley. What they found shook the global scientific community. Beneath the forest lay a vast urban network. Streets, straight avenues, plazas, raised platforms, drainage canals, organized agricultural fields, thousands of interconnected structures. A civilization that had existed for at least 2,000 years up until roughly the 15th century, sustaining tens of thousands of people in a complex hierarchical society with advanced engineering. This was not a village, not a cluster of huts. This was an Amazonian city, and no one knew it existed until a few years ago, and it is not alone. Across the basin, archaeologists continue to uncover similar networks, entire societies that the forest swallowed when their people disappeared, most likely from European diseases that reached them before the Europeans themselves did, traveling upriver by indirect contact, measles, smallpox, influenza, entire peoples annihilated without ever having seen a white man. And the forest, which is endlessly patient, erased the evidence in a matter of centuries. When 18th and 19th century explorers arrived believing they were entering a virgin jungle, they weren't. They were walking through a cemetery covered in green leaves. But let's return to the animals, because the next creature is living proof that certain Amazon legends are real, however impossible they sound. The candiru. I need you to stay with me here, because the story of this fish is a fascinating tangle of science, myth, journalistic exaggeration, and very ancient fear. The candiru is tiny. Most specimens measure between 2 and 6 centimeters. Elongated, slender, nearly transparent, living in the murky rivers of the Amazon basin, feeding primarily on the blood of larger fish. It is a parasite. It enters its host through the gills, anchors itself with backward-pointing spines, drinks blood for a few minutes, and leaves. This much is standard parasitism, well documented in the aquatic world. The problem is the legend. For more than a century, travelers, explorers, and then sensationalist documentaries repeated a disturbing claim that the candiru can detect the flow of urine from a person urinating in the river, will swim upstream through that stream, and enter the human body through the urethra, where its spines lock it in place and only surgery can remove it. The story was repeated so many times it became one of the great terrors of the Amazon, shared by tour guides, writers, and biologists alike. Is it true? The short answer is probably not, as it's been told. The long answer is more interesting. There is exactly one medically documented case, recorded in Brazil in 1997, and its credibility has been seriously questioned by specialists. Subsequent studies attempting to confirm that the candiru is attracted to human urine were unable to do so. The hypothesis that the fish detects ammonia and swims into a urine stream has been challenged repeatedly. What science does not dispute is this: the candiru exists. It is a real parasite. It attacks large fish with lethal efficiency, and in rare cases, it has been extracted from the human body through natural openings. What the science refutes is the frequency and the exact mechanism. What the myth preserved is the legitimate horror of a vampire fish moving through dark river water in search of warm blood. The reality of a fish that can kill larger fish from the inside is already disturbing enough on its own. The forest doesn't need to exaggerate to frighten you. It only needs you to know it a little better. And since we're speaking of things that travel through the water, let me take you to one of the strangest places in the entire basin, a place where, quite literally, the river boils. Deep in the Peruvian Amazon, in a region sacred to the Ashaninka people, there is a waterway called Shanai Timpishka. The name, in the local language, means something close to boiled by the heat of the sun. It is a tributary of the Pachitea River, hidden within the Amazonian vegetation, and it possesses a quality that was long dismissed as indigenous folklore. Its waters reach temperatures close to 90 degrees Celsius, not full boiling along its entire length year-round, but in many stretches the water genuinely boils, steam rises, and contact burns immediately. Any animal that falls in dies. Local communities describe the cooked bodies of frogs, lizards, and birds drifting in the current, literally prepared by the river itself. For decades, scientists wrote the accounts off as exaggerated folk tales, until a Peruvian-American geoscientist named Andrés Russo decided to go find it. And he did. There it was, boiling exactly as the grandparents had always said. The challenge then was explaining why. The area is not volcanic, There is no obvious geothermal activity at the surface. The most widely accepted hypothesis today is that it is a hydrothermal system fed by deep groundwater, passing through ancient geological faults, heated by pressure and contact with hot rock kilometers underground, and emerging at the surface still carrying that heat. An extraordinarily rare phenomenon, but an entirely real one. The Shanai Timpishka is sacred to Ashaninka communities. Their shamans use it in ritual. The place is protected by indigenous cosmovision. When archaeologists and geologists study it, they do so with permission and with respect. And that brings us to a lesson the Amazon repeats again and again. Many of the legends that European conquerors dismissed as indigenous delusions were precise descriptions of real phenomena. The elders didn't invent what they described, they saw it, and no one believed them. Back into the water then, because beneath the surface of any Amazon river lives a creature that can knock a horse off its feet and stop a human heart without ever touching the victim with teeth or spine. The porake, the Amazonian electric eel. And let me correct something immediately, because this is one of the most persistent errors on the internet. The porake is not actually an eel. Anatomically, it is far closer to a catfish than to the true eels of the Mediterranean. But the name stuck, and the world calls it an eel regardless. This animal can exceed 2 meters in length and 20 kilograms in weight. Its body is elongated, almost cylindrical, dark-colored, looking more like a thick snake than a fish. But what makes it unlike anything else on the planet is what it carries inside. Approximately 80% of its body is occupied by 3 specialized electric organs made up of thousands upon thousands of cells called electrocytes stacked in series like a biological battery. When the porake strikes, all of those cells fire simultaneously, generating a discharge that can reach 860 volts. For context, the electrical socket in most homes delivers 220 volts. The porake delivers nearly 4 times that. A discharge of this magnitude can paralyze a horse, drop a cow crossing the river, or stop the heart of a human being who already has cardiac vulnerabilities. While confirmed human deaths attributed to the porake are rare, they do occur, almost always because the discharge renders the person unconscious and the shallow river water finishes the job. The victim doesn't die from electrocution in the conventional sense. They die because the electricity switches them off and the river does the rest. But the most remarkable discovery came from biologist Kenneth Catania at Vanderbilt University, who documented in recent years that the porake is capable of partially leaving the water, arching its body against an attacker on land, and delivering its discharge at a specific, targeted point on the intruder. Not just discharging blindly into the water, actively leaping and applying maximum voltage to the most effective location on the body. Catania also demonstrated that the current delivered outside the water hits with greater intensity precisely because it is no longer dispersed through an aquatic medium. The porake evolved a biological anti-air defense system. Nobody taught it. It's written into its genes. Staying with the subject of what the forest conceals, there is another story that spent centuries classified as pure mythology and that modern science is finally beginning to take seriously. The story of the mappinguari, indigenous peoples across the entire Amazon basin, from Bolivia to northern Brazil, have passed down for generations the description of a large, terrestrial, slow-moving creature, shaggy-haired, carrying an unbearable smell, capable of producing deep and terrifying cries. They call it mappinguari, or yuma, or mappinguari depending on the region. They describe a bipedal being the size of a large bear, with long claws, and a hide so thick that arrows cannot pierce it. Anthropologists catalogued it as folklore, another creature from the Amazonian bestiary. And there the story sat for decades, until certain paleontologists noticed something striking. The description of the mappinguari, in its specific details, matches an animal that really did exist in South America, the giant ground sloth. The genus Megatherium and its close relatives lived on this continent until approximately 10,000 years ago. They were sloths, yes, but the size of a small elephant, capable of rearing up on their hind legs to reach the canopy, armed with enormous claws and bearing a hide so thick It contained small bony plates embedded in the skin called osteoderms. Arrows would have bounced off them. The question some researchers ask, carefully, is whether a residual population of some descendant of those sloths could have survived in the most remote and inaccessible corners of the basin, giving rise to the accounts. The honest scientific answer is, there is no evidence, no photographs, no recent remains, no single body. The most likely explanation is that the mappinguari is an ancestral collective memory, passed down across thousands of years from the time when the first Amazonian peoples lived alongside living giant sloths. Indigenous oral memory is astonishingly long. There are accounts across different Amazonian cultures that appear to describe animals extinct for millennia with a level of detail that can only come from direct observation. The mappinguari, in that sense, would not be a creature still alive. It would be a memory of a time when this forest had genuine monsters walking beneath the trees, and humans watched them from behind the leaves. And as if the natural world wanted to offer physical evidence that those sloths existed, in recent decades, Brazilian geologists began finding something extraordinary across multiple regions of the Amazon and the south of the country. Tunnels. Enormous tunnels, perfectly excavated, with parallel claw marks running along the walls and ceilings. Too regular to have been formed by water erosion, too large to have been dug by any living animal known today. They were called paleoticas, ancient burrows. And the paleontological conclusion was unambiguous. These structures were carved by the giant sloths and giant armadillos that populated South America during the last ice age. Some measure more than 1.5 meters high, more than a meter wide, extending for tens of meters underground. Others connect into complex networks and remain open today in regions where the forest has grown back over them. A person can walk inside an Amazon paleotoca and place their hand directly on the claw marks left by an animal that lived 10,000 years ago. It is one of the very few places on Earth where you can physically touch the trail of an extinct creature. Still in the forest, because now I need to introduce you to the animal that holds an absolute record, the most venomous spider in the world, according to the Guinness Book of World Records. And unlike many deadly spiders, this one doesn't stay still in a web waiting for a fly to blunder in. It hunts. It comes looking for you. It walks the forest floor at night and climbs walls during the day, living in leaf litter, in bromeliads, in fallen logs, and very frequently in places your mental health would prefer it didn't. Inside shoes, inside fruit boxes, inside folds of clothing left to air dry. Its scientific name is Phenutria. In Brazil it's called armadeira, because when it feels threatened, it rears up on its back legs and raises the front two in an unmistakable fighting posture. A stance that could not be saying anything other than, don't take another step. Some species in the genus reach 15 centimeters with legs extended. Brown, covered in fine hairs, with reddish-orange chelicerae visible when the mouth opens. Its venom contains potent neurotoxins that in humans produce immediate and extreme pain, heavy sweating, tremors, paralysis, and respiratory failure. Death in untreated cases. Children and the elderly are most vulnerable. Brazil records approximately 4,000 encounters with the armadeira per year. Mortality is low thanks to the antidote, but the physical trauma can be severe. The armadeira is one of the main reasons why, in Amazonian regions and across much of southeastern Brazil, children are taught from an early age to shake their shoes before putting them on in the morning. It looks paranoid from outside the tropics. In the tropics, it is basic survival, and the forest travels without warning. Banana export shipments leaving Brazil for Europe and the United States have occasionally arrived at their destination with a passenger hidden among the bunches. Armadeiras that rode freight the entire journey. Temporary closures of supermarkets in the United Kingdom and Germany have been triggered by Phenutria specimens arriving with the fruit. When the Amazon moves, it moves without announcing itself. On the subject of things moving unseen, there is a chapter of Amazonian human history that most people have never heard, and that stands as one of the most disturbing demonstrations of how a human being can enter the forest with the full weight of modern industry and still lose. In 1928, American automobile magnate Henry Ford, founder of the Ford Motor Company, decided he needed a reliable domestic rubber supply for his tires. Rubber came from the Hevea brasiliensis tree, native to the Amazon. But the British had smuggled seeds out of Brazil decades earlier and established enormous plantations across Malaysia and other parts of Asia, gaining control of the global market. Ford had no intention of depending on British supply chains. He purchased a vast territory in the heart of the Brazilian Amazon, in the Tapajós River region, and set out to build an American city in the middle of the jungle. He named it Fordlandia. He built it with the logic of Detroit, not of the Amazon. Houses with metal sheet roofing, perfect for accumulating heat at 40 degrees. Cafeterias serving mandatory American menus, hamburgers, salads made with imported vegetables, hot dogs. A prohibition on alcohol, restrictions on women in certain areas, factory-style schedules, a cinema, a hospital, a tennis club, a Protestant church, and rubber plantations organized like rows of corn. Thousands of identical trees planted side by side on Amazonian soil. The forest consumed them, not literally but biologically. Because in native Amazonian conditions, the rubber tree grows dispersed among thousands of different species. That dispersion protects it. The fungi and parasites that attack Hevea don't find enough identical trees in a small space to spread efficiently. But when you plant thousands of rubber trees in dense rows, the way Ford's engineers did, you build a biological highway for disease. The fungus Microcyclus ulae, South American leaf blight, multiplied without check and devastated entire plantations year after year. Brazilian workers resented the imposed American cultural restrictions and revolted multiple times. Climate, insects, tropical disease, and cultural incompatibility finished the project off. In 1945, Ford sold Fordlandia back to the Brazilian government for a fraction of what he had invested. The total loss in today's values runs into hundreds of millions of dollars. Today, Fordlandia is a ghost town, half swallowed by the forest. The American-style wooden houses still stand, rotting in the humidity. The hospital is empty. The cinema has no roof. Fire hydrants protrude from the undergrowth. The water tower, still visible, is buried in vines. A few Brazilians live in the ruins with nowhere else to go. And the forest, as always, continues its patient advance across the brickwork. The lesson none of the business histories mention. The Amazon is not an empty region waiting to be developed. It is a living system, ancient and complex, with its own rules. Whoever enters believing they can impose an external order on it loses. Every single time. The only variable is how long it takes them to understand that. Back to the water now, because I still owe you 2 aquatic nightmares that most viewers have never heard of. The first one has teeth like saber blades. It's called the payara, though it goes by other names: vampire fish, wolffish, dragonfish. Its scientific name is Hydrolicus scomboroides. It lives in the rapids of the Amazon and Orinoco river systems, in oxygen-rich, turbulent water where other fish can barely hold position. Silvery, elongated, muscular, hydrodynamic, measuring between 70 centimeters and just over a meter. But what defines it are the 2 lower fangs. These canines can reach 15 centimeters in length. They protrude so far that the payara's own upper jaw has 2 sockets to accommodate them when the mouth closes. This fish has its skull perforated from within to make room for its own teeth. Without those holes, the payara couldn't close its mouth without impaling the roof of its own palate. The payara hunts by spearing its prey on those fangs. Its primary target is smaller fish, including piranha. While the rest of the world considers the piranha the most feared predator in the river, Amazonian fishermen know better. The piranha has a predator of its own. The payara catches them and runs them through. It is a carnivore that eats other carnivores, and it does so with 2 bone lances that grew from its own jaw. For trophy sport fishermen from outside the region, a large payara is one of the great Amazonian prizes. The locals simply respect it. If an angry payara bites you, those fangs cut through muscle and tendon with the same ease they apply to their natural prey. The second aquatic nightmare doesn't look like a nightmare at all. No fangs, no visible teeth, no international reputation. It is flat, round, grey or brown, and rests buried in the sandy bottom of Amazonian rivers looking exactly like a stone. It is the Amazonian River stingray, genus Potamotrigon, and according to riverside fishermen across Brazil, Peru, Colombia, and Venezuela, it is the creature they fear most in the water. More than the caiman, more than the piranha, more than the anaconda, more than anything else with teeth. Why? The sting. At the base of its tail, the stingray carries a bony barb coated in venomous tissue. When a person accidentally steps on a ray buried in the sandy riverbed, the animal responds with a reflex defense, tail whipping up, barb driving into the ankle, calf, or foot of whoever disturbed it. The barb enters, and when it comes out, pieces of its serrated structure remain buried in the muscle. The wound does not close easily. The venom produces extreme pain, swelling, fever, and frequently leads to serious secondary infection. In remote communities without rapid access to medical care, stingray wounds can lead to tissue necrosis, gangrene, and, in the worst cases, amputation. Deaths exist but are rare. The real cost is disability. Many riverside fishermen walk with a limp for the rest of their lives from an improperly healed stingray wound. In the Amazonian imagination, the stingray is the most respected hidden monster on the riverbed. The piranha makes noise. The anaconda gives you time to see it coming. The stingray does nothing. It simply is, and that is precisely what makes it one of the most feared creatures in the river. Take a moment here. If you're still with me on this journey through the hidden Amazon, drop another like right now and share this video with someone who loves real documentaries, the kind that go where other channels don't dare. Every time you share, you help these stories reach people who would otherwise never hear them. Let's continue. There is an Amazonian discovery that rewrote everything the world believed about what this forest looked like before European contact. And the evidence is literally beneath the feet of millions of people living in the region today. It is called Terra Preta, Black Earth, and it is one of the great mysteries solved by tropical archaeology in the last 50 years. The natural soil of the Amazon rainforest is, in large part, surprisingly poor in nutrients. Anyone seeing the forest for the first time assumes the opposite, because the vegetation is extravagant. But that vegetation grows by exploiting an extraordinarily rapid cycle. Leaves fall, decompose within weeks in the heat and humidity, and the nutrients return immediately to the nearest root. It is a closed system, efficient but fragile. Remove the forest, and the exposed soil loses its nutrients within a few years, becoming nearly sterile. This was the foundation of an old historical argument. The Amazon could never have sustained large civilizations because the soil simply couldn't feed them. Then archaeologists started finding, scattered across different parts of the basin, patches of earth that were nothing like the rest. Dark, deep, rich, fertile soil, capable of producing excellent harvests year after year, with no modern fertilizer. Local farmers used it for their best plots. Scientists analyzed it, and what they found changed history. That dark earth is artificial. It was deliberately manufactured by pre-Columbian indigenous societies. It is made from a blend of plant remains, ceramic fragments, bones, charcoal from controlled low-temperature burning, and organic urban waste accumulated over centuries. Ancient Amazonian peoples didn't just live within the forest, they modified it. They actively improved the soil, converting barren areas into fertile ones, sustaining intensive cultivation that fed large populations on that black earth. When an Amazonian farmer today finds a patch of Terra Preta on their land, they know they've struck gold. They plant their best crops there. The soil remains fertile after hundreds, in some cases thousands, of years with no modern management. It is among the strongest evidence that pre-colonial Amazonia was a deeply humanized landscape, with agronomic knowledge that Europeans never had the capacity to recognize. When the conquistadors wrote that they saw countless villages along the riverbanks, later historians accused them of exaggerating. Today we know they probably weren't, and that the entire civilization they glimpsed was wiped out mainly by disease, not by warfare. The peoples died before the Europeans even reached them. Their settlements became leaf litter, and the forest spent 300 years pretending they had never existed. Something similar surrounds the geoglyphs of Acre in western Brazil. As deforestation pulled the forest back from certain areas of Acre State, aircraft flying over the cleared ground began photographing something extraordinary in the exposed earth: enormous geometric structures. Squares, circles, octagons, connected by perfectly straight avenues, excavated into the ground with astonishing precision. Geoglyphs, some of them hundreds of meters across. Their exact purpose remains debated. Ceremonial centers, astronomical calendars, defensive enclosures, territorial markers. What is undisputed is that they were built by organized societies, with planning and coordinated labor, between 1,000 and 2,000 years ago. And that for all of that time they lay hidden beneath the forest. We only saw them because the trees were cut. If the Amazonian forest had remained intact, we would never have found them. That is a deeply unsettling thought when you follow it to its conclusion. Out there, beneath the regions of Amazon still standing, there are who knows how many other geoglyphs, how many other buried cities, how many other lost civilizations. And we will only discover them if we cut the trees. The paradox is brutal. To know the hidden Amazon, you have to destroy it, unless we use LiDAR. With laser light fired from aircraft, we can read the ground beneath the canopy without touching a single tree. And every new scan of the Amazon reveals something. Every pass finds new structures. We are only just beginning to read a book written thousands of years ago, back to the hidden fauna, because the next creature is one of my favorites in this whole story, and almost no one outside the Amazon knows it exists. Allow me to introduce you to the suruku pico de Haka. Its scientific name is Lachesis muta. It is the largest pit viper in the entire Americas, and one of the largest venomous snakes anywhere on Earth. It can reach 3.5 meters in length. 3.5 meters. When people think of large Amazonian snakes, they usually think of anacondas, but anacondas are boas, not vipers. The distinction is fundamental. Boas kill by constriction, vipers kill by venom. And the suruku is the most venomous, most massive viper on the continent. Its body is heavy and rough-textured, patterned in dark brown and gold that makes it an almost perfect shadow of the forest floor. It inhabits remote areas, far from human settlement in dense and humid forest, and it is genuinely rare, extraordinarily difficult for researchers to find, which is part of why it never appears in documentaries. Filming it in the wild requires weeks of searching with local guides and considerable luck, but local communities know it intimately, and the respect they hold for it borders on terror. In Brazilian Portuguese, and in some varieties of Amazonian Spanish as well, it is called matabue, ox killer, meaning capable of killing an adult ox with a single bite. This is not exaggeration. Its venom is highly hemotoxic and is delivered in massive quantities given the size of its fangs and glands. A bite without rapid medical attention is nearly always fatal in humans, and in remote areas the problem is exactly that. The injured person may be days of river travel away from the nearest hospital. There is one detail that makes it even more unsettling. The suruku is one of the very few vipers in the world that vibrates its tail forcefully against the leaf litter when it feels threatened, producing a sound remarkably similar to a rattlesnake's rattle, though it carries no rattle at all. This behavior was long thought to be exclusive to North American rattlesnakes, but the suruku does it equally. And when someone hears that sound in the middle of the forest, unable to see where it's coming from, the psychological effect is devastating. Your brain registers the sound, but your eyes find nothing, because the snake is lying perfectly camouflaged beneath the dry leaves, sometimes 30 centimeters from your foot. The suruku has no interest in attacking you. It wants only for you to understand that it is there and to step back. If you understand the message, you survive. If you don't, you don't. And since we're speaking of creatures that prefer not to be found, let me share one more legend, one of the most widely circulated among Amazonian fishermen, and one that also has a rather disturbing basis in reality. The legend of the boyuna, the great black serpent of the river. In Brazilian and various Amazonian cultures, the boyuna is a colossal snake, the size of the river itself, living in the deep, dark water, capable of moving its body beneath the surface at night with such force that it capsizes boats. 19th-century explorers recorded testimony from fishermen and river traders who swore they had seen aquatic serpents 15, 20, 30 meters long. The largest anacondas, scientifically documented, measure roughly 6 to 7 meters. Not 10. Not 15, not 30. Were the fishermen lying, exaggerating? Probably. But there is one detail that modern science doesn't entirely set aside. During the Paleocene epoch, roughly 60 million years ago, a real snake lived in what is now the Amazon basin, discovered in fossil deposits in Colombia. It was called Titanoboa kerajonensis. It measured between 12 and 15 meters in length and weighed over 1,000 kilograms. It was the largest constrictor that ever lived, capable of swallowing crocodilians whole. The Titanoboa is extinct. There is no evidence it survived, but its existence proves that in this territory, the concept of a 15-meter snake is not mythology. There was a time in the prehistory of this very forest when the boyuna really did swim in these waters. The modern fishermen exaggerate, but the forest, in some deep sense of geological time, exaggerates nothing at all. The Amazonian rainforest is passing through, at this precise moment as you watch this, one of the worst environmental crises in its recorded history. Deforestation, though reduced in some years by international pressure and domestic policy, continues at alarming rates. Every minute that passes, somewhere in the basin, a tree falls. Every minute. Some scientists estimate the Amazon has already lost close to 20% of its original forest cover since the modern colonial era began, and many believe a tipping point exists, a threshold beyond which the entire system enters an irreversible spiral of degradation. The forest regulates its own climate by generating its own rainfall. Lose enough canopy, and it can no longer generate sufficient rain. The remaining trees begin dying from drought. That further reduces the canopy, which further reduces the rain. A spiral. Some models place that tipping point at around 20 to 25% loss. We are close, dangerously close. Illegal gold mining poisons entire rivers with mercury. The metal is used to amalgamate flakes in the sediment and ends up in the water, in the fish, in the people who eat the fish. Riverside Amazonian communities today show blood mercury levels comparable to those measured in contaminated industrial zones in the developed world. Children with neurological delays, adults with motor impairments, entire communities silently poisoned across decades. Poaching targets the most visible species, but also, and this is the perversity of it, the least known ones. There is an international market for live exotic animals that moves tens of billions of dollars per year. And the Amazon is one of its major illegal suppliers. Turtles, parrots, small monkeys, poisoned dart frogs, rare beetles, ornamental fish. For every animal that arrives alive to a collector in Asia or Europe, between 5 and 10 die along the journey. And the most heavily trafficked animals are the unknown ones, precisely because species without a public profile have weaker legal protection and greater appeal to collectors seeking rarities. And then there is fire. Every dry season, thousands of burn sites are deliberately set to gain grazing land or cropland. Many of those fires escape control and consume enormous swaths of forest. In recent years, they have reached magnitudes that made front pages around the world. But the problem is not only the fires that trend. It is the 1,000 small fires burning daily that no one sees. The death of the Amazon is not a dramatic event. It is a slow, dispersed, almost invisible hemorrhage. And yet, there is hope. Hope with real names and real faces. National park systems across Amazonian countries protect millions of hectares with reasonable effectiveness. Demarcated indigenous territories, though under pressure, show dramatically lower deforestation rates than adjacent unprotected lands. Citizen science, real-time satellite monitoring, international agreements against illegal wildlife trade, bioeconomy initiatives that generate income without destroying the forest, all of it accumulates. Young biologists from every Amazonian country are describing new species almost every week, cataloging what exists before it is lost. Indigenous and riverside communities that know this forest better than any university are, finally, beginning to be heard. The fight is not won, but it is not lost either. I want to close this journey with an idea that has stayed with me for a long time, and that the Amazon represents more clearly than anywhere else on the planet. We live in an era when human beings believe they have mapped everything. Every street in every city is on the internet. Every square meter of the planet has been photographed from a satellite. Every large animal has been documented, filmed, and studied. The general feeling is that there are no more real mysteries, that the planet is a known place, that the age of exploration ended centuries ago. The Amazon is living proof that this feeling is a lie. Here, on this same continent where we live, at this precise moment, there are species no biologist has ever seen. There are human civilizations buried that no archaeologist has excavated. There are geological phenomena that no school textbook mentions. There are venoms no laboratory has fully analyzed. There are ecological relationships between species that science hasn't even begun to suspect. The Amazon is not just a forest, it is the last great unread library on Earth, and we are burning it before learning to read it. Every hectare that falls to a chainsaw is a lost chapter. Every contaminated river is an erased page. Every species extinguished before it was ever described is a word that no one will ever read. We don't know what we're losing because we didn't know it existed. That is the true Amazonian tragedy. Not losing what was known, losing what was unknown, killing what we never had time to learn to respect. And yet, somewhere in that forest, right now, a Lenomia caterpillar sits motionless on a tree trunk. A giant centipede waits for bats in a cave. A suruku rests beneath the leaves. A payara hunts piranha in the rapids. A porake lies buried in the riverbed mud. A stingray lies flat against the sand. A river boils in a remote valley. A paleotoka waits, empty, its walls still bearing the claw marks of an animal 10,000 years gone. A lost city sleeps beneath the roots. The Amazon is still there, wild, complex, ancient, unexplored, and ready to teach us everything we still do not know. It only asks that we leave it in peace long enough to do it. If this journey through the hidden Amazon moved you, frightened you, made you think, or sparked a hunger to know more, leave us a like right now. Every like sends a clear signal that people want documentaries like this. Deep, strange, unafraid, the kind that show what other channels won't touch. Subscribe to Wild Dominion if you haven't yet. You don't want to miss what's coming next. Share this with someone who needs to hear this story. The forest is watching, and as long as there are eyes watching it back with respect, there is hope. We'll see you on the next wild journey.